No Purpose Without Love is a podcast dedicated to helping you find purpose through the relentless pursuit of God's love. The unfortunate reality is that we are born into a world that does not know God. Since God is synonymous with love, to be without God is to be without love. This podcast aims to bring light to the dark areas of your life so that you gain a deeper connection with love as a person, more affectionately known as Jesus. Jesus spoke often about the kingdom of God, and in the kingdom, love is the why behind everything that exists, including our purpose. I am your host, Dave Guerreso, and my hope and prayer is that you will experience the overwhelming love of God so powerfully that you will become love to a world that is still very much without love. God has given me the ability to provide the spark, but He wants to fan into flames the purpose that He has for you, which always leaves a trail of breadcrumbs leading right back to our Father and Creator. Please remember to follow this podcast to continue receiving notifications about new episodes as they're released. Now let's get fired up. Hello and welcome to No Purpose Without Love, the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Guerreso, and with me today, I have Sherry Ollison. Sherry is born and raised in North Carolina, but currently resides in Smyrna, Georgia. She's single. She has a 35-year-old son. She's the founder of Reconcile for You, which provides bookkeeping services to small businesses. She's a certified Quickbooks Proadvisor, and she provides monthly financial reports that help business owners make informed decisions. Welcome to the show, Sherry. It's good to have you. Why don't you just open up by, telling us the story of how you got in this particular workspace that you're in, and even how, what drew you from North Carolina to Georgia?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Dave. I came to Atlanta because I came to visit a friend, and I just fell in love with it. And believe it or not, I went back, gave notice to my job, and moved to Atlanta. But she was a great friend, and I got a job right away. But basically, it was around the time of the Olympics, so Atlanta was an exciting place to be. So I just made the move. But as far as being in this space right now, it came through a layoff. I was laid off from my job, and I also, at the same time I was laid off, I got this notice in my mail that I owed the IRS like $7,000. So I was like in a daze, and so I went to church that week, and it was on a Wednesday night of that week, and I was attending a mega church, and after the service, a lady sitting behind me tapped me on the shoulder. But first of all, I got to tell you that prior to this, I had gone to the grocery store to get some ingredients for a salad. And I had picked up a cucumber, and the cucumber was very expensive for a cucumber. So I was like, let me put this back. I got to start budgeting here. I'm laid off. I owe money. And so after the service, the lady sitting behind me tapped me on the shoulder. She said, excuse me, would you like some cucumbers? And I was so shocked. I asked her to repeat it. She said, would you like some cucumbers? And so I told her what had happened earlier that day. And she started laughing, and she said, I asked the Lord, who could I give them to? Because I grew them myself and I have too many. So I took that cucumber and I made a pickle out of one of them, and I put it in a jar with a date to remind myself that the Lord would get me out of that pickle. And his way of doing that was to call me to start my own business. And so I got started, and at first it wasn't a success right away. So I was like, well, maybe I missed him. And so, I was kind of discouraged, thinking I had missed him. And then this stranger walked up to me one day, and she said, excuse me, the Lord told me to ask you why you hadn't done what He told you to do about that business. And I was so shocked. I was like, what? And she said, I don't know you. And so I spoke to her for a few minutes, and she said she thought it had something to do with contact. And I remembered then that he had told me to network. So that's what got me started in this business, and networking has become something that I do.
And that's something. What an amazing story about the cucumbers. that
Yeah.
Unbelievable that even when you don't say it or you don't think that God hears, He provides.
Right. And that was so encouraging to me because I said, if he cares about something as insignificant as a cucumber, I certainly don't have to worry about the bigger things. So,
What's interesting about that too is I often hear that, when it comes to the little things of life, God don't care about that. And I learned a long time ago that couldn't be further from the truth. And this story is a perfect example of that.
yes, it is.
Well, this kind of leads to the next question I had for you. In what ways has God revealed himself to you as you've experienced life so far? So this is already an entry level, answer to that question, but I know you have plenty more stories to share. So tell me more about that, Sherry.
Well, he has introduced me to some people that are just divine connections, people that have helped me. Like, well, first of all, I think the first thing that really helped me was that my son's a graphic designer. And for my Christmas present one year, or right at the beginning of this, he gave me a website for my Christmas present. So that kind of confirmed, okay, maybe that was. And then I was like, okay, well, I got a business. What do I name it? And of course, that was prior to him doing the website. But I was brainstorming, and one day I'm sitting in Barnes and Noble, and he just dropped a name in my spirit, Reconcile for You. And I was like, oh, that's perfect because I love reconciliation. And I rushed home at the time to make sure that the name wasn't taken on the internet. And when it wasn't, I was like, of course it's not. The Lord gave it to me. So so yeah, once I told my son that, then he designed the website and everything just began to fall into place. Actually at the time I like I said, I was laid off. I didn't have any extra money. Well, I was working for a guy who had just hired me as a contractor to set up his QuickBooks. And at that time, when you purchase QuickBooks, you also got an extra copy for your home and your office. So I was like, well, if you want me to start a business, I have no way. So I just had to humble myself and I asked the guy, I was like, can I have your extra copy of QuickBooks? And he was like, sure. And that's how my business really got started. So
Wow.
so it was a progression, and just, I saw the Lord opening up doors.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because a lot of times we strive and strive for something, but when God gets involved, it's like he just gives it all to you. Like everything you need, it just ends up showing up. And those are amazing. I love hearing that when these stories that I hear where people experience that from God, he's good.
He is,
Yeah.
he is. And
All
he
right.
provides.
Well, sorry. The next question I want to get into is a question about purpose, right? The podcast is called No Purpose Without Love. So obviously I have this emphasis that I place on the subject of purpose, but I'm curious from your perspective, Sherry, what does it mean to you to live out one's purpose?
That is to me being in the center of his will. Um, for example, one of the things he called me to do when I first started my business was to visit small businesses and hand out my card and tell them that Jesus loves them. I was terrified being an introvert, and I just had to overcome that fear, you know, because I knew that was part of my purpose. So it's overcoming, the fears that you have, overcoming the things that you desire to do. Because it wasn't so much I didn't the thought of doing my business. I mean, I was excited. I love bookkeeping. I love working with numbers, but there was that part of me that wanted to do it my way. And so the purpose, walking out your purpose is, just like Jesus did on the cross, you're going to have to submit to the will of the Father. So it's just been learning to die to myself, learning to put aside my desires and do whatever he's asking, because and that continually changes. And like I said, networking, that was another thing. It was like I didn't really want to network. I want to work with numbers. I want to sit at my desk and just, you know, calculate numbers all day.
Yeah.
But that was not the way he wanted me to do it. Because one thing about purpose also, you got to do it, like it said, run the race. You got to run your race the way he designed it. Because every runner in a race has to run in a way that, that is according to the rules. So same thing here. Your purpose is going to have to be fulfilled according to how God has designed it.
And how has that surrender, right, that to God's design, how has that changed your life for the better?
Oh my goodness. It's amazing because if you're doing something and you know you're outside of his will, you're not going to have peace. So so whenever I submit to his will and do it his way, it's like I get, not only do I get that peace, I get the help that I need. So I can see where it's so much better when he's involved than when I do it myself. So yeah, submitting to his will and receiving the help that you need, it is priceless. It's priceless. I'm continually amazed. Even doing this podcast, Dave, I got to share this story with you. The first time I was asked to do a podcast, I had to sign an agreement saying that I would promote it on my social media platforms. And so once the podcast was done, I did not like it at all. I was like, nobody's ever going to see that podcast. But I was convicted. I was convicted. I did the podcast. It was released January the 1st. I did not add that to my social media until July 1st. It took 6 months. But finally, the conviction won because, first of all, I realized that although I didn't like the podcast, that the message in it was good and the content, if it would help somebody, what I talked about, regardless of my delivery, it was worth it. So that, and it made me feel better. It made me, have that peace once again because I knew it was something that the Lord impressed upon.
So it's peace, it's help, getting the help. And then the thing I thought about that too was, we think about the scripture that talks about one can chase 1,000, two can chase 10,000. But what if the two is you and the Lord himself? Like what a cool partnership, right? Nothing's impossible at that point. But then also the third thing I hear you talking about is how it enables you to be a conduit.
Right.
Because in order for you to get to the point where you could release that on social media, right, that's sort of the physical manifestation of the idea that this thing that I went through that I might be otherwise uncomfortable with can actually be used as something positive for others. So you saw how that experience through you can make a positive impact on other lives. And that's what it means to be a conduit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, really, because we are here for, like you say, a purpose. And so my purpose, is to, first of all, represent him in the marketplace. And so in that particular podcast, I was talking about how you could incorporate the fruit of the spirit in your business. And that idea didn't come from me. It was from a gentleman that does small business Samaritans coaching. And he came up with, and I thought it was a great idea. And I expanded on it and said, I was sharing how I did it in my business. And I thought about it. I'm like, I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs would like to know, hear more about that. So
absolutely.
So yeah.
All right. So a lot of folks nowadays feel a lot of pressure on this subject of purpose too. Like, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know how to live out my purpose. And it makes them almost feel like there's this driving force behind they should, but they feel bad about themselves because they can't. They don't know where to start. Like, what would you say to those that are out there struggling with this? How do they find their way towards, living out that purpose?
It comes, I think, Dave, with obedience, because I didn't discover my purpose until about midway through my journey. And I heard this message as a new believer that said, if God tells you to do something and you don't do it, he's not going to keep telling you if you're not going to obey him, so that message just said, oh, wow, I don't want to lose that connection or, disobey him. So I think it comes with every step of obedience. Then he revealed he might ask you to do even more and more. And until you realize, because I discovered not only my purpose in business, but also in ministry. And it develops, it's not something that You just sit down and he's going to say, hey, this is your purpose. You find it, you discover it, as you're going along. Because I recall I was attending a retreat with a friend. And when we went in, they had tables set up where they had different gifts on the table. And so I had never met her, but we both sat down at this table in the middle of the table that had a sign that said teacher. I was like, teacher? I was like, I'm no teacher. And she said, oh, I can see myself doing that. Well, a couple of days later, well, not a couple of days, maybe a week later, we went to see another sharing her testimony. And while we were there was a prophetic word spoken over us that she actually recorded. And at the time, I didn't know too much about prophecy. But there was a young girl there who prophesied over me. And she said, at the end of her message, she said, I feel like God is calling you to be a teacher. So, I mean, he confirmed it like within 1 week. And I mean, once again, I'm screaming, no, I don't want to do that. But but yeah, obedience. I mean, of course, I obeyed and it's just obedience is the key. It really is.
The irony of you bringing that up is that I was just talking to my wife last night about how obedience is ultimately more or greater than sacrifice.
Yes.
Right? So often we make so many sacrifices, but the truth is when we follow his call and we and obey his commands, we end up finding ourselves into these wonderful places anyway, and we don't have to worry about anything, right? We ended up it's like that whole burden yoke is easy, the burden is light. You just all the pressure comes off because it's him that's providing, like a good father would. And
Yes.
I think a lot of times obedience, what happens in my mind anyways, like depending on how you were raised, if you were raised by some really strong authoritarian parents, or you worked in environments, especially in your early years, where the boss was really oppressive and on you, we think obedience, and I think it's easy for us to get stuck in this thing of somebody just standing over you, pointing fingers and yelling at you, and that's not how obedience to the Lord works. It's peaceful, it's calming, it's you feel loved in the process as you obey. And it's like when you fight, you go against the grain, you go against the design, and that's what creates pain and struggle in our lives a lot of times. It doesn't mean that we won't have it when we are being obedient, but it's different because he'll help you overcome the struggle, even when you are, as long as you're following his lead.
That is so true, Dave. And it reminds me of Paul. And, when the Lord said to him that he was kicking against the goad, because it's when you're fighting it, And I heard another guy one time that I used to follow, and he was like, I don't know why I fought so hard against my calling, because he said, I love it, and once I surrendered, and I went through that same thing too. I did. And like I said, not wanting to do public speaking and things that just took me way out of my comfort zone. But like you said, I remember the first time he told me to share my testimony. And as I was talking, the Holy Spirit took over and I could see the interest on the faces of the people. And I was like, this is exciting. Why am I fearing something that when you do it in conjunction with him, it's just an adventure, really.
It is. And it's funny you mentioned too the public speaking thing. I have my own story about that. I don't want to get into the long version, but I'll try to give the abbreviated version of the story. I did a speech in college to 5 students in the class on how to wrap a book in a paper bag like we used to when we were in grade school. I couldn't even speak the words. I was shaking. No words would come out. I excused myself. And so I eventually had to come back in the classroom after the instructor coursed me back in and, mumbled my way through it. You've flash forward a few years and, I remember my boss at work asking me to speak to a large crowd of people. And I told him no. I said, I don't do public speaking. I don't talk in front of people. You're gonna have to find somebody else. But he made me do it. And yes, I got through it. But then I had some ministry opportunities of my own where I was asked to lead a class at church. And it was a group that met weekly, a Sunday school class. And the way that that grew me, and then continuing to speak where I worked, and even started seeking it out in Toastmasters, which teaches you leadership and public speaking. It's amazing how I grew as a public speaker and didn't realize the gift that God had already put in me to be this great speaker. And it's like, wow, I never would have realized that unless I stepped into that by faith and trusted those who were even leading me into it, seemingly against my will. And the coolest part of that story that I like saying is I was playing ping pong with that same boss one day. And I was just telling him, like, look at all the things that happened and how you pushed me. And I became a believer in the push, because sometimes people don't like the push thing. They just want to, they'll go when they're ready. But I think sometimes a push is necessary, because I said to him, it's like, look at where I've come, like how far I've come. And he didn't even like flinch. He just said, I know, with a calm, straight face. And I'm like, what do you mean, He goes, I saw it in you.
Oh my goodness.
And so like, that's a testament to great leadership and that foresight to be able to look at somebody and see them and go, you know what? I see potential in that person. And I love them. I care about them too much to let them stay where they are when I know what they are going to become. And so because of his faith and assertion that, no, you're better than this, Dave, and you can do this, it ushered me into so many great opportunities, and it gave me a vision for a gift that I didn't even know I had. And so it's true.
Awesome.
We got to follow God's leading, and remember that some of the leaders that are placed in our lives that may push us seemingly against our will, sometimes God is placing them there to be that voice and to be that push or nudge that we.
Right. And it reminds me of a story I read, a book I was reading, where they mentioned that as long as there's someone who believes in you, there's no way you can fail. And they talk about how even a wife that believes in her husband, how that would propel him to success.
Powerful.
But having someone believe in you, that's key.
Yes, and as a man married for 20 years, that is absolutely true. My wife's words have the ability to propel me far beyond what I believe they can.
Oh, good.
When you hear it, it's like, wow, yeah, it's nice to know that someone believes, and it gives you an extra energy.
It does. It does.
All right, so shifting gears a little bit. So, I had talked to you about this before we started. One thing that stands out to me about you is that you consistently show up loyally for others all the time, Sherry. And that's an amazing attribute. So what is it about showing up for others in relationships consistently like that? Why do you believe that is so important, especially when we're living a purposeful life?
It adds value to the person. It shows them that they're important. Being faithful is something that I've had a friend, a lot of friends actually, and they always tease me about being on time, because to me it's important. I want to be known as reliable, okay? And that's something in my business as well. If I say I'm going to do something, I want to do it. And I think it's important for your integrity. But like I said, it's also important to let people know that they're important and that you value them. You value them as a person, and it gives them a sense of purpose too, to know that people value them.
For sure. Yeah. I think all of us want to feel like we matter.
Yeah.
All of us want to feel like there is a reason for our existence. And the truth is there is, right? But I think we lose sight of that.
Right.
And when somebody else steps in and creates that value and points out, hey, I really do care about you and value you enough that I want to give you my most precious resource, my time, right? And you're reliable and consistent about it, that communicates a very strong message that I really do care for you and you really are valuable to me.
Right. And I attend a spiritual warfare class, and one of the things they talk about all the time is that there are four things that every human being desires, and they're called laws: love, acceptance, worth, and security. So yeah, when you can accept someone, when you accept them as they are, and I've always been able to do that, is accept people the way they are, because we all have our shortcomings,
Yes,
you know?
that's true.
So just being able to accept people where they are for who they are, it's just, I used to didn't think anything about that until I realized, not everybody does that. But yeah, I just believe in that.
So it's love, acceptance, worth, and security. Wow,
That
that's powerful. Yeah. Yeah, I want to think through that some more because there's a lot. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I feel like that could be its own podcast.
yes, it is, because it's an ongoing discussion in spiritual war.
Yes, it is. Yeah, definitely. We should maybe do a part two, Sherry, where you come on and we talk about spiritual warfare. I think that would make a great episode.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sure, because I've learned a lot. I've learned a
Okay.
lot. As a matter of fact, my first thought was, wow, I wish I'd have learned it sooner. Then I would not have went through so many things.
You and me
Yes.
both. It is very prevalent in every area of my life. I can see the enemy working against me and the purposes of God in my life. And more so now than ever, because I feel like the closer we get to honoring God and bringing the glory, right, to him, the more the light shines. And it becomes almost like I picture this dark supernatural realm and you see these bright lights shining where
Hmm.
those that seek God actually are. And it's almost like the enemy sees the light shining and getting brighter. And so he attacks that area. That's almost what, I visually see in my mind when I think about this stuff.
Yes, yes, and it does. And it's like the closer you get to your breakthrough, yeah, the more he attacks.
He does. So, next question. How do love and purpose intersect for you?
Wow. You know what, Dave? Love was probably the greatest lesson the Lord taught me as a new believer. And it was just mentioned during a prayer, a prayer night about a month ago with this new prayer partner at church. I'm on the prayer team. And it's a new lady, and she looked at me and she say, "When I look at you, I see an abundance of love." And I didn't tell her in that setting what that really meant, but I did eventually tell her, and and it confirmed what she had said. But one of the lessons the Lord taught me about love, how crucial it is when I first started out as a new believer, I had a supervisor who just did not like me, and it was intense. And I mean, she didn't try to hide it in any way, calling me in the office and everything. At first, as a new believer, my flesh was rising up, wanting to say, "Who do you think you're talking to?" But
Mhm.
I had to squash that. So I went to the Lord and I asked him, "Was it me?" Because I knew I couldn't change her, and I felt in my spirit that He said no. So I made a decision to love her, and so I would go in each day and ask her if there was anything I could help her with, and just being kind to her. So at my evaluation, she said to me, she said, "I'm so glad we get along because the two people before you were fired because I didn't get along with them." She said, "But because you and I get along, they're going to know I'm not the problem." So, so I just thought that was hysterical. I couldn't wait to get in the bathroom and laugh and say, "Lord, you really got a sense of humor here." But, but what happened later was, one day I woke up and said, "Lord, I want to learn something new today." And yes, this supervisor and I became very close. I mean, I loved her because I mean, when you're following the word, it works. It really
Mhm.
does. And so one day I woke up and said, "I want to learn something new." And I got to work and I discovered she had been escorted from the premises for embezzlement. And when I went back to my desk, when after going in her to her office to get something, and there was a picture of her little boy, and I said, "Lord, why did that have to happen?" And he said as clear as day, and I'll never forget it. And he said, "No one mistreats my children and get away with it."
Wow.
So it showed me the importance of love, that, he would defend me like that. And I mean, at this point, like I said, I love the lady. It bothered me that it happened. So love is just, I mean, the Bible just stresses it over and over. It's like love covers a multitude of sins, even so. Love and purpose. Even if I fulfill my purpose and I don't have love, I have nothing. So to me, I can get out here and do my business. I can be the best bookkeeper on this side of heaven. But if I don't do it in love, it's worthless. It's not going to serve me. or anyone else. So to me, it's like instilling that, well, representing the love of God to my client, just, you know, being a conduit of love, letting people see maybe that, you know, because not everybody's a believer, but just showing that love of God in my actions and in my interactions in the business. That's what it's all about. You've got to, you've got your purpose, but it has to be done.
Yeah. Well,
Love is love.
oh, sorry. You know, there are some other questions too that pop in my mind as you're talking, right? Because there's the purpose of what you did while you were there, but these are some other things that come to mind. Like, what did she learn about God's love through that interaction? What did you learn about God's love through that interaction? And what did others overlooking that relationship and some of the dysfunction within and seeing the outcome and the way things played out, what did they learn about God's love through that interaction? And I think sometimes we forget about the domino effect, that purpose is woven into that domino effect, right? Like as the dominoes fall, purpose is the essence that pushes or brushes or whooshes out, if you will, from that wave that occurs after. And how far into eternity, not just in this life as we know it, but how far does that carry into eternity? We simply do not know who we will one day meet when we are with the Lord in heaven that said, because of this thing that happened, I'm here. And
Yes.
there's something amazing when I think in that direction, because that's the bigness of God. And that's the bigness of his purposes, that it goes so far beyond just ourselves or even the people that we directly interact with. It can extend well beyond those interactions to people that we haven't even met yet.
Yes. Yes. And I could see how it it was impacting like the owner, because I recall one time that when she had called me into the office, it's like he just at one point, and this was one day when she was like really upset. And it's like he just burst in, opened the door, and looked straight at me and say, "Hey, are you okay?" So it let me know that, you know, the Lord is looking out for me here.
Yeah,
So yeah.
he absolutely is all the
And,
time.
yeah, yeah. And he's using others, and they're seeing, like you said, they're seeing everything played out. So that's that influence. That's that influence. That, and sometimes we don't even know it. Like you just pointed out, we have no idea. It's
Nope.
just being played out.
That's right. So as we wrap up, Sherry, what is the ultimate message of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I think what I would want to share is that when you're fulfilling your purpose, always, because I've learned as I'm networking that I hear a lot of things from a lot of different people, and it all sounds good. One person would say, I did this to become a success, I did that. First of all, you got to remember they're not telling you everything, okay? And then success is not a rule. Don't think that by doing what they did that you're going to get the same results. So as far as purpose, you want to run everything through the filter of what God has called you to do. So at the end of the day, regardless of what you hear, is it in line with what you've heard the Lord say to you? So just be obedient, being obedient to him, as opposed to trying to be a people pleaser. So become a God pleaser in whatever you're doing.
That's good. And I'm glad that you said that what works for some isn't always going to work for others. And unfortunately, like, I think we write a lot of books that way, right? Like, this is what worked for me. If you just do this, everything will be, but it doesn't go that way. I mean, I've
Right,
tried to do what others have done and I don't get the same results, but part of that's because I'm not the same person they are. I don't have the same experiences. I don't have the same my existence woven in the fabric of time doesn't line up exactly with that other person's life, right? God has a
right,
different plan for me and a different design for me. And sometimes what I think is my purpose is actually, far off from what he initially had planned for me in the first place. So by being open to that, by being obedient and following his leading, I feel like that's where we ultimately find what it is that he has for us. But, if we're rigid and we're not willing to do that, that's where we can find ourselves trying to repeat patterns that we were never meant to repeat.
Absolutely.
So
That's
good
good.
stuff. All right. So how can folks reach you, Sherry, and what specific services do you offer?
Okay, I provide bookkeeping, monthly financial reports to small businesses, your profit and loss, your balance sheet, and your cash flow. I am a certified QuickBooks Proadvisor, but I just got certified with Zero, and Zero is a great tool for those startups, and especially if money is a concern, you can get it at a really reasonable price. So I do that on a monthly basis, give you those numbers that makes tax season a breeze. You can find me at Reconcile for You, Reconcile, the number 4, the letter U.com, or Sherry Ollison on LinkedIn.
Excellent. And I will make sure that I post your links in the episode description. So if any of you are listening and you want to get a hold of Sherry, that's your access point to her right there. Do you serve, and forgive me if you already said this, Sherry, do you serve people in all states?
I do.
Okay. All right. So it really doesn't matter where you are in the nation. If you need help with your bookkeeping, Sherry can help you. So reconcileforyou.com is, I will make sure that gets put in the description of the podcast episode. So thank you so much, Sherry. Really appreciate you being with us for this episode and spending your time with us and all the wonderful insights that you shared with us. I know many are going to gain tremendous value from that. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you once again for listening and supporting the No Purpose Without Love podcast. If you like what you've been hearing, please remember to follow this podcast to continue receiving notifications about new upcoming episodes. For more information about how to start your own purpose-filled journey or to get in touch with me, you can start my online course by going to courses.beaconleaders.com, or you can email me at info@beaconleaders.com. You can also visit my website at www.davideguerreso.com. I will post these links and others in the description section of each episode as well. So until next time, remember to lead well, live on purpose, and honor God with your life.